For every great year in WWE that gave us iconic moments and amazing stories, there's one disastrous year that makes you question why you even watch wrestling. In this video, we're revisiting the best and worst years in WWE history, starting with perhaps the best time to be a wrestling fan. If you want to understand what WWE looks like when it's firing on all cylinders, just watch the year 2000. Red hot off the momentum of the Attitude Era, this year was built around the WWF Championship picture, and it featured names like The Rock, Kurt Angle, The Undertaker, and Triple H in the main event scene. With Austin on the shelf for majority of the year, The Rock stepped up as the company's top babyface and main evented almost every single pay-per-view in 2000. Triple H's run as champion through the first half of the year, backed by Stephanie McMahon, gave Raw a consistent villain that every show was built around. The feuds he cycled through, with Cactus Jack, The Rock, Shane McMahon, and eventually Kurt Angle, were all fun. Speaking of Kurt Angle, 2000 was the year he went from promising rookie to legit main eventer in record time. His comedic segments balanced his serious in-ring work perfectly, and by the end of the year, he was WWF champion. The tag team division was arguably the best it's ever been. Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys, and the Dudley Boys were all operating at their peak simultaneously, producing ladder matches and TLC matches that had fans losing their minds. Raw's ratings were massive, the pay-per-views felt special, and the wrestling was consistently excellent with names like Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit on the roster. 2000 stands as the creative peak of the Attitude Era, and for many fans, the single best year WWE has ever produced. After witnessing a year like 2000, it's almost painful to talk about what the company looked like a decade later. By 2010, the Attitude Era was a distant memory, and the company had settled into a creative rut so deep it had its own zip code. The PG era was in full swing, and while the rating itself wasn't the problem, the timid booking that came with it absolutely was. The same names cycled through the main event scene over and over: Cena, Randy Orton, Sheamus, with little variation and almost no surprises. The WWE Championship picture spent most of the year feeling like a merry-go-round. Nexus was the one genuine bright spot. When the NXT rookies stormed the ring and dismantled everything in sight on that June episode of Raw, it was the most exciting WWE television in years. For a few weeks, it felt like something new was actually happening. Then the company panicked, rushed Cena to defeat Barrett, and systematically buried every member of the group before the angle ever reached its potential. The Undertaker and Rey Mysterio had a quietly underrated feud through the middle of the year, HBK and Taker had a banger at Mania, and CM Punk's straight-edge society character showed flashes of what he was capable of when given material to work with. But these were islands in a sea of mediocrity. By the end of 2010, the shows felt tired. But if 2010 was WWE sleepwalking, then 1998 was the company running full speed with its hair on fire, and it was absolutely beautiful. 1998 was Stone Cold Steve Austin's year. He won the Royal Rumble, captured the championship at WrestleMania 14 from Shawn Michaels, and spent the rest of the year making Vince McMahon's life miserable in the most entertaining way imaginable. Their dynamic drove Raw's ratings to heights the company had never seen. But 1998 wasn't just a one-man show. The Undertaker and Kane's feud gave the year a dark counterweight to Austin's chaos. Mankind was involved in some of the most brutally memorable moments of the era, and The Rock was in the middle of transforming from a bland pretty boy into the most electrifying man in sports entertainment. DX were at their obnoxious, entertaining peak. The Attitude Era content was getting edgier, the crowds were louder, and the competition with WCW was pushing WWF to take creative swings they never would have otherwise. 1998 was loud, unpredictable, and absolutely alive. It was wrestling at its most fun. Coming off back-to-back exceptional years from 1997 to 2000, 2001 had every reason to be the greatest in company history, and for the first 6 months, it genuinely looked like it would be. WrestleMania 17 in Houston is widely considered the greatest pay-per-view ever produced, and it's hard to argue. TLC 2, Austin vs. Rock in the main event, Kurt Angle vs. Chris Benoit, Shane McMahon taking insane bumps, it was a perfect show. And the momentum coming out of it was crazy. But then, things went south. Vince bought WCW, and in theory, an invasion angle pitting WWE's roster against WCW's should have been the biggest angle in wrestling history. However, in practice, it was one of the biggest fumbles ever. Instead of bringing in the established WCW stars that fans actually wanted to see like Goldberg, Sting, Hulk Hogan, and the NWO, Vince populated the invading roster with mid-carders and jobbers. When the Invasion chapter finally closed at Survivor Series, it was more relief than payoff. A genuinely great first half and a wasted second half. That's 2001 in a sentence. After the disappointment of a squandered opportunity in 2001, WWE spent the next few years rebuilding. By 2005, the pieces were finally in place, and the company delivered one of its hottest years in history. The brand split was working exactly as intended. Raw and SmackDown felt like separate shows with their own identities, their own rosters, and their own titles worth caring about. WrestleMania 21 set the tone for the entire year. John Cena defeating JBL to win his first WWE Championship and Batista destroying Triple H for the World Heavyweight title meant two new stars were simultaneously crowned to lead the company forward. But the match everyone talked about was Shawn Michaels versus Kurt Angle, a technical masterpiece that reminded everyone what elite professional wrestling looks like when two of the best in history are locked in together. The Undertaker and Randy Orton's intense feud throughout the year was another highlight that kept fans glued to the TV. Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio's battle over the custody of Dominic and the Edge-Lita Matt Hardy love triangle gave us personal feuds that blurred the lines between reality and kayfabe. Speaking of Edge, the first ever Money in the Bank ladder match debuted in the same year, introducing a concept that would become one of wrestling's most reliable storytelling tools for the next 2 decades. Batista's rise was the feel-good story of the year, with his babyface run on SmackDown establishing him as a top star. Meanwhile, on Raw, Cena was figuring out his character in real time. Imperfect, occasionally polarizing, but undeniably over with a massive portion of the audience. When it was all said and done, 2005 was consistently good, logically booked, and one of the most satisfying years as a fan. But if 2005 was WWE quietly doing everything right, then 2015 was the company loudly doing almost everything wrong. And the most frustrating part was that the talent to have a great year was absolutely there. The booking just refused to let it happen. The Royal Rumble set the tone immediately, and not in a good way. Roman Reigns winning the Rumble in Philadelphia generated one of the most hostile crowd reactions in history. They even booed The Rock trying to celebrate with Roman Reigns. That's how bad the disconnect was. Vince spent the entire year trying to force Roman Reigns down the audience's throat through sheer repetition, seemingly convinced that if he just kept presenting him as the top guy, the crowd would eventually come around. Unfortunately, they didn't. The Seth Rollins heel run as the Authority's chosen champion was genuinely fun, and the Architect had amazing matches against Cena and Ambrose. Kevin Owens arrived and immediately felt like a star, beating John Cena clean in his debut and then being stuck in mid-card limbo for months. WrestleMania 31 was the one genuine bright spot of the year, with Rollins' cash-in, an amazing RKO, an insane ladder match, and a solid mid-card. But by the end of 2015, talented performers like Cesaro, Dolph Ziggler, and Dean Ambrose were spinning their wheels. The tag division was thin, the ambition was there on paper, but the execution was absent on screen. However, coming off a year that tested the patience of even the most loyal fans, WWE in 2016 gave us one of the most exciting years in history. The year of 2016 started rough. WrestleMania 32 was an unsatisfying spectacle that set an attendance record while delivering almost nothing memorable in the ring. The Roman Reigns problem hadn't gone away, but what happened over the following months was one of the more impressive creative turnarounds in years. The brand split returned in July, and this time it came with genuine energy behind it. The draft felt meaningful, the rosters felt balanced, and suddenly there were twice as many main event opportunities for talent that had been suffocating on one show. SmackDown in particular transformed almost overnight into the better product, with AJ Styles, Dean Ambrose, and The Miz carrying a show that quickly developed its own distinct voice. Styles deserves his own paragraph for his legendary run in 2016. He arrived at the Royal Rumble in January, and within weeks it was obvious he was something special. By the end of the year, he was WWE Champion, having feuded with Cena and Ambrose in matches that were among the best on any show all year. Kevin Owens won the Universal Championship. Sasha Banks and Charlotte were having some solid matches on the main roster. The New Day were at peak popularity. The Miz was delivering some of the best promos on the entire roster. Goldberg squashed Lesnar, The Shield went to war, NXT was putting on bangers, and wrestling felt exciting again. The product wasn't perfect in 2016, but compared to the year before, this felt like a company that had rediscovered what made its product worth watching. However, 2 decades before this revolution, the company almost went bankrupt with one of the worst years in history. 1995 wasn't just a bad year, it was an existential crisis in slow motion. WCW was aggressively closing the gap. Nitro launched and immediately positioned itself as a legitimate rival to Raw. Meanwhile, Vince responded to the competitive pressure with some of the most uninspired creative decisions in company history. Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, and Randy Savage were gone or leaving. The stars who carried the Attitude Era, Austin, Rock, Triple H, hadn't yet arrived or weren't ready. What we had in the meantime was Diesel as champion, HBK, and some cartoonish gimmicks that fans were tired of. WrestleMania 11 crystallized everything wrong with the year. Lawrence Taylor, an NFL linebacker, main evented over Diesel versus Shawn Michaels for the WWF Championship. The decision to chase mainstream celebrity attention at the expense of the actual roster felt like a company that had lost confidence in its own product. The in-ring quality wasn't completely absent, though. Bret Hart remained excellent regardless of the material he was given, and Shawn Michaels was emerging as one of the most gifted performers in the world. But the attendance was down, ratings were down, morale was down. 1995 was WWE without a clear identity, without a breakout star, and without a convincing answer to the question of where professional wrestling was going next. The answer, as it turned out, was just around the corner. After the misery of 1995 and a 1996 that wasn't much better, WWE entered 1997 as a company with its back against the wall. The Monday Night Wars were in full swing, Nitro was regularly beating Raw in the ratings, and Hulk Hogan's NWO was the hottest act in wrestling. WWE needed something. What they found was an attitude. The product got edgier, the characters got more complex, and for the first time in years, the shows felt unpredictable again. The Montreal Screwjob alone would make 1997 historically significant. Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels defined the entire second half of the year. When Vince McMahon ordered the referee to ring the bell at Survivor Series while Hart was locked in the sharpshooter, it was a moment so shocking that fans debated for years whether it was real. It fundamentally changed how fans perceived Vince McMahon, and that transformation into the corporate villain would fuel the next 3 years of television. Steve Austin was ascending rapidly. His feud with Bret Hart reached its peak at WrestleMania 13 in a match that stands as one of the greatest in company history. The Undertaker was in a personal feud with Paul Bearer, building toward his brother's debut. D-Generation X formed in the fall and immediately injected rebellious energy into a roster that badly needed it. 1997 wasn't a perfectly executed year. The transition was messy, and the rating losses to WCW stung. But in hindsight, it was the year WWE found the creative direction that would make 1998 and beyond so explosive. The fuse was lit in 1997. Everything else was the explosion. However, a decade after 1997, wrestling faced its darkest year. WWE in 2007 was a genuinely solid product operating amidst scandals and controversies that almost killed wrestling. The matches and stories on screen were solid with stars like Cena, Shawn Michaels, Randy Orton, Undertaker, and Batista in the main event. Edge was at his conniving, entertaining best as a heel. Rey Mysterio, CM Punk, and Mr. Kennedy were all compelling mid-card acts with main event potential simmering underneath. But then came June 25th. Chris Benoit's death and the circumstances surrounding it cast a shadow over the entire year that no amount of good television could lift. The scrubbing of Benoit from history, the heightened scrutiny around wrestlers' health and safety, fundamentally changed the company's relationship with its own past. 2007 can't be discussed without acknowledging that, and it shouldn't be. What remains is a year of good wrestling and capable storytelling permanently marked by a dark scar. But while at least the product on screen was solid in 2007, 2019 delivered perhaps the worst year in WWE history. The year of 2019 opened with promise. The Royal Rumble produced 2 entertaining matches, and Becky Lynch's ascent toward WrestleMania was one of the best organic main event stories in years. Lynch's win at Mania and Kofi Kingston's crowning felt genuinely special. And then WWE spent the rest of the year systematically destroying every reason you had to stay invested. Seth Rollins won the Universal Championship and immediately got booked into a lame feud with Baron Corbin before having the worst Hell in a Cell match in history. Kofi Kingston was treated like an afterthought for most of his reign before Brock Lesnar squashed him in seconds on the first SmackDown on Fox. The problems kept getting worse with Goldberg and Taker almost losing their lives in the ring, Roman Reigns being fed dog food, and cringy relationship storylines with Rusev, Lana, Lashley, and the Kanellis family. Stars from NXT like Samoa Joe, Ricochet, and Aleister Black, who should have been main event acts, were lost in the midcard with no direction. NXT, ironically, was producing the most compelling stories of the year, which made the main roster's shortcomings even harder to excuse. By all means, 2019 was perhaps the most frustrating time to be a wrestling fan. And if you want to find out exactly what made 2019 the worst year in WWE history, check out this video next.